Feels good on a Friday. That's right, orange and blue today. Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason, Friday show talking about weapons for Bo Nix. And there's actually quite a few choices out there for the Broncos, Mace.
And it seems like the choices keep expanding by the day. Like, this is the thing that happens every year as we get close to free agency. See a name or two added to the list because teams make cuts, or a player says, as the goalie in Slapshot said so long ago, trade me right bleeping now, then hang up.
It's an interesting market for the wide receiver position here with the tampering period coming up. And then a trade potentially. That's where we'll start with Seattle. And DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think he tweeted like, AU WTF, because Tyler Lockett's been released and DK Metcalf has asked for a trade. Now, the early rumblings are Seattle wants quite a bit for DK Metcalf. So is that an avenue the Broncos should explore?
Probably not. I think we're talking about the price maybe being a little bit too rich, especially considering that there are other options, and also considering that the Broncos do feel pretty good about their receiver room. One of the things that you and I have said is they probably feel better about the wide receiver room than you. I'm talking about you in the audience here right now, than you probably feel about it, that they've got a lot of optimism about Troy Franklin and where he can go, that they've got a lot of optimism about Marvin Mims Jr. and how they can expand the menu for him going forward. And they have optimism about Devon Vele continuing to evolve into a Tim Patrick type of receiver based on the form that he showed last year. Now, they'll check in on everything. Like, there was the report when all the Deebo Samuel stuff was going down. Oh, the Broncos expressed some interest. George Payton makes a lot of phone calls. George Payton makes a phone call.
Sure.
Just to take the temperature. It doesn't mean the Broncos are particularly interested, but sometimes you want to know what the entire market looks like. But I'd say with DK Metcalf, you're talking about a price that's probably too high, especially when you consider all the other needs that you would like to address and that you can address with a draft class that's deep in areas of Broncos need.
Yeah, areas of Broncos needs do not necessarily include wide receiver. What's interesting, Mace, and everyone's going to have their reports, because even guys that we like, I believe I saw a video with Bill Barnwell, who is like, a veteran free agent receiver, really fits the Broncos. And I'm like, I love Bill. I just don't agree with that based on the young guys that are on the roster already.
I think Bill and a lot of others around the country are playing fantasy football.
Could be. Yeah.
I think it's fantasy football GM rather than real GM that's leading to some of these pundit takes. That's even leading to some of the things saying, oh, Broncos are favored to get this guy. Broncos are favored to get that guy. I don't think that's necessarily aligned with reality. I think there's a splash coming for the Broncos in free agency. I just think it's more likely to come an inside linebacker than wide receiver.
Yeah. That's where the splash and the money basically will be spent. The other thing, Mace, before we get to more receivers and this DK situation, the Broncos are a team you want to talk about. From a national perspective, I get it. Guys are, kind of having a hypothesis, an educated guess, sometimes just a straight up guess. But the Broncos are a team that on the 4-letter networks, they'll move the needle because of Sean Payton, because of Bo Nix.
That's a welcome change from
being the afterthought.
And they were in danger of becoming an afterthought. I mean, even with Sean Payton last year, coming out of Russell Wilson pre-Bo Nix, they were kind of an afterthought.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then before Bo Nix established that he could be at least a solid NFL quarterback, early last season, they were an afterthought. I mean, really, when would you say the Broncos start returning to the tips of people's tongues outside of Broncos country and the Rocky Mountain region? Realistically.
Actually, it's a loss. It's the Kansas City game.
Okay.
Wow, they stuck it to Kansas City, and had it not been for a blocked field goal, they would have beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead.
Yeah.
I think and that's weird that it's a loss, right?
It's weird, but I think you're right there. I think that's the first time that they really got noticed, even though it was a game that wasn't on national television. Like it was a Sunday afternoon regional game, 11 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff. I'd say either that, or even though it was against a bad team, that or the Cleveland game. Cleveland game being on Monday Night Football. For a lot of people, that was the first real glance at Bo Nix. Now, there was the Thursday night game in New Orleans as well, but that was Bo Nix Bo Nix scrambling a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That game against Cleveland, that's when he delivered the touchdown pass to Marvin Mims, the rope down the middle of the field.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time around the country that the Broncos made a lot of people sit up in their chairs and take notice. And I think it was that play, that throw, because it's a quarterback-driven league, and certainly on the 4-letter network and all the national chatterbox shows, it's a quarterback-driven conversation. And when you have a quarterback make a throw like that in front of everybody, that's going to catch attention. I'd say maybe it was that throw that put the Broncos back into the national consciousness.
And what's funny is you just named it, because there's the drive 2, and then there's the rope.
The rope.
The rope.
The rope, the dart, the bullet.
Yeah, I'm country. I'll go with the rope.
But here's the thing, because you have a quarterback who can make that kind of throw, and even in the playoff loss, the touchdown pass to Troy Franklin that everybody saw right out of the blocks, because you have a quarterback who can make that kind of throw as well, or the passes to Marvin Mims Jr. late in that Saturday game against Cincinnati. Now it's like, oh, this is why you get the conversation. Oh, get him a better receiver, because you have plays like this. If anything, I'll say that some of this chatter is actually an affirmation of Bo Nix, because it's saying, you got the quarterback, can you get him a better receiver? It's a compliment to Bo Nix.
Yes.
It's just, I don't necessarily think it's going to result in a wide receiver one coming in. Now, do I think a receiver will enter the room, a veteran receiver? Yes.
Sure.
Do I think it'll be a receiver maybe better than the Josh Reynolds category? Yes. But I don't think it's going to be the guy who had the first picture there at the top of our graphic, which was DK Metcalf.
Yeah, DK Metcalf, price is too rich for what Seattle wants currently. So that leads us to another veteran receiver who had a chance at a ring if Buffalo doesn't stop in the postseason, as they always do. And that's Amari Cooper, the next veteran receiver to talk about. Perhaps that's the level. He didn't do much with Buffalo. At times wasn't asked to do much with Buffalo. But is Amari Cooper then the proper level of free agent, better than Josh Reynolds, not at the top at where DK Metcalf's at, but maybe in that sweet spot the Broncos are looking for?
I think this is the level you're talking about. If you bring in a receiver, someone who maybe isn't in his prime, but can still contribute some leadership as well to the room, and probably won't be at a break the bank cost. Now, this also made it, I'm not sure that this, if it happens right away. This might be a market settles and you see sort of how it looks maybe after a day or two. I don't know that Amari Cooper would be an instant strike if the Broncos bring him in, but I think he'd probably make more sense than DK Metcalf, not for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is doesn't require sacrificing draft capital. That's the thing with DK Metcalf. You're talking about a trade, so you're not just talking about salary cap, space. You're talking about draft capital. So sort of like the whole thing when you traded for Russell Wilson. It's not just going to be expensive. It's going to cost you draft capital. At least if you sign a receiver rather than trade for a receiver, you're only cutting down your available resources in one area, cap or draft capital. So that's another reason why, if you're going to add a veteran, to me, just do it in free agency.
Yep. And for me, Mace, I don't want to use the word threat, but I'm going to use the word threat. I want a guy that's kind of not a threat to Cortland Sutton, because if you get DK Metcalf, you're paying him. And then, I mean, that's your Sutton replacement, but then Sutton's going to trade it to the Steelers or whatever. There's a reporter from Penn Live saying, like, if things don't go well with the Broncos and Cortland Sutton, the Steelers will show interest. Of course, they're showing interest in a lot of receivers, according to reporters around that team. So for me, it's like, I kind of like Amari Cooper because it's no threat to Cortland Sutton and his status with the team.
Yeah, and I think Amari Cooper might be the type of guy who can, in addition to Cortland Sutton, I think Amari Cooper might be able to help bring along Troy Franklin.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And that's something you're looking at as well. What presence can aid the development of Troy Franklin? That's somebody I think you're pretty high on, and you have optimism after the touchdown catch. So, that finally moment that you had there in the wild card round, after waiting and waiting and waiting and trying to have that deep ball connection, finally getting it there. But I think having another voice might not be the worst thing. Having a voice like Amari Cooper's might not be the worst thing at all. And the thing is, I think he can still be productive. I don't really look at the lack of production with Buffalo that you referred to. I don't really look at that and say, okay, he's ready for the glue factory, so to speak. I mean, you're not too far removed from a 1,250-yard season with a lousy quarterback situation. That was 2023 in Cleveland, when it was Deshaun Watson and PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and then Joe Flacco coming in there at the end to kind of save everyone's skin. But Joe Flacco wasn't that great. He was just better than the flotsam and jetsam they had for several weeks there in Cleveland. So if he can be that productive with a quarterback situation that could kindly be described as a mess, I think he could be pretty productive working with Bo Nix and taking advantage of the opportunities that are given to him. And we've also seen with Sean Payton, with Emmanuel Sanders a few years ago, how he can kind of wring some of those last drops out of a veteran receiver. It's so to quote the film Moneyball, when Billy Bean's talking to Dave Justice, not paying you for what you were paying, getting the last drops, the drops out of what you are right now. I want what you are right now, and that's okay. You're not asking for Amari Cooper of Cowboys Raiders peak. You'd be asking for Amari Cooper today, and that's enough.
Yeah, and I think that would be plenty for the Denver Broncos. I like the idea, but I love the idea, provided that he's healthy, of the slot god, Chris Godwin. I think that guy, if he's healthy in that position, working from the slot, could be the favorite target for Bo Nix. Sorry, Cortland Sutton. But when you have a player that's run after the catch, that can get underneath, knows how to work a soft spot in a zone, is a threat, again, he's got to be healthy. Chris Godwin is an interesting option for the Broncos as well.
Chris Godwin's transformative.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how much demand is there going to be, and will the Broncos be willing to meet it, especially with the ACL that he had last year?
And the timing of his ACL too, because he'll be ready for the start of this season. At least he should be. But it's also like you would kind of go into the year on a hope and a prayer of like, he'll be good. He'll be good when he gets to full strength. But in week 1, it'll be a bit of an unknown.
And you really wouldn't be able to get those reps to build the timing with the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing with Chris Godwin. If you bring him in, because he wouldn't be back at full speed, you'd be limited to kind of half speed reps, jog through reps, mental reps, working with Bo Nix. Would that be enough to develop the cohesion and timing that you'd need for effectiveness? I think that first year together might be underwhelming. And is that okay? Would everybody have the patience for that?
Or would they surge in the playoffs?
Well,
Come
that's what
December.
you'd hope. You would hope it would be peaking in the postseason, but then there's also the other thing looming over it is the natural recovery time for a player coming off of an injury like that, which typically involves not really being back to 100% until the following year. So you have two factors in play. One, being back to being cleared to play and being able to play, but not being 100%, kind of being at that 95% level. And then having to get that chemistry on the fly during a season, you may not see what it really is supposed to look like until 2026.
Right.
And is that enough? By that time, Chris Godwin would be 30.
That's different.
Yeah. Do you, and that's another thing too. You're talking about a receiver in a third contract. I mean, believe it or not, Chris Godwin's going into his 9th season.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love the idea of Chris Godwin.
Sure.
The thing is, he's so prolific. And the other thing is, looking at all positions in free agency, Cease, it's not a great free agency class.
No.
And because of that, there's a premium on the quality that is there. And of course, the salary cap going up more than expected, that too is going to drive some prices up. And also in terms of positional value, I think the price on Chris Godwin may end up exceeding what the Broncos actually want to pay a wide receiver, which is why I kind of come back to among these three that we talk about on this top line. It's why if it's one of these three, I come back to an Amari Cooper. But I think also if we kind of go to the next the next level, I mean, maybe do you look at Darius Slayton? Do you look at Deontay Johnson? Do you look at Joshua Palmer? Guys like that.
Slayton's going to have a little bit of a market. Reports around that team are like, okay, is Slayton going to be a little bit more popular on the free agent market? It's a no on Deontay Johnson, like a big fat no, because it seems like everywhere he goes, he just gets in trouble.
Yeah. Do you have a strong enough locker room to withstand Deontay Johnson? That's the question.
Well, teams with strong lockers have already determined that. And, you know, the Baltimore Ravens, you're not working out there with Lamar and company. Like, okay, something's a little off. And the Steelers, of course, with a strong locker room as well. So Deontay not doing himself any favors. Let's just say that.
How about a Brandon Cooks reunion?
From what I have heard is maybe Cooks, and I've said this on the air before, but, you know, maybe Cooks isn't exactly exchanging Christmas cards with Sean Payton. You know, which is fine. You could still work together and not be buddy-buddy, but, you know, maybe Cooks would say, you know what, I'm going to go somewhere else.
Well, it's always interesting because we know that Sean Payton has a type when it comes to wide receiver.
Yeah.
He talks about it often. He wants guys with length, guys with size. They can be splendid splinters, rangy, narrow builds, but he wants guys with length and with reach. And yet you go back 11 years and he used a first round draft pick on a guy who's 5'9" 3/4.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't Marvin Mims be Brandon Cooks?
Marvin Mims could probably be better than, and it's wild to say this, better in a different way. I think
Okay.
I think Marvin Mims, now that they've figured things out, I think he can be a more successful version of Brandon Cooks, because with Cooks, they tried some of the running elements with him, but it was not something they used nearly as often back in New Orleans as the Broncos are trying to do with Mims.
He wasn't as good at it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
the second year he was with New Orleans, Cooks averaged 2.3 yards per attempt on the ground.
It's
Of
not
course,
great, Bob.
he was also a more effective receiver because he had 1,138 yards. So
Mims could be a 1,000-yard guy.
I think he absolutely could be, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is this coming year.
Yeah. So I like Amari Cooper and littering, and I love Chris Godwin, but I just don't see that as happening. A couple more before we wrap up the show. Wide receivers, because we might have to do another show on Evan Ingram. Of course, Evan Ingram might be signed by the time Monday's show rolls around. But Diggs, Adams, I'll toss you those guys, and we'll wrap up today's program.
Devontae Adams, I think, still has something left in the tank. It's really a question of whether Devontae Adams would want Denver. But I think that's one, if he wants to come here, that's one that I think you do legitimately investigate. And I would even say that's one where if you had a plan, maybe you alter it. I'm not sure I would alter a plan for DK Metcalf, in part because of the draft capital involved. I think I would alter a plan for Devontae Adams.
That's a pretty all-in move.
Yeah.
Get Devontae in court, Marvin as your third. It's a pretty all-in move.
Yeah. But Devontae makes quarterbacks better. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. We talk about quarterbacks and do they elevate the team? I think Adams is a guy who actually does that for quarterbacks. He takes them to another level.
Mm-hmm. Imagine how it influences a defense.
It's that rare. He's that rare receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's, who else in this receiver class do we know we're talking about having a bust in Canton and still being at that high elite level like he is? Really,
it's not out there.
Yeah,
of the guys we're talking about, it's not out there.
He's still a unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
still enamored with his buddy Aaron Rodgers. Also, no.
Which is also why it's looming over this, right? You think is he probably going to go where Aaron Rodgers goes?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say so. But it's fascinating. It's fun to think about for a moment.
It's like when you see that friend with that toxic girlfriend or toxic boyfriend, and you're like, man. If you could just pull away for a little bit.
Or maybe he just views Aaron Rodgers as his meat lover's pizza in the trunk.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's there. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have to worry. He's going to eat.
Come to Denver. You'll eat fine.
It may not be meat lover's pizza. It's still good.
It's still really good. No on Diggs then as a final guy. No, because I'm no on Diggs, and not for the reasons people would think. I just think he's kind of done. Adams has more left. Certainly, Amari has more left than Diggs, in my opinion.
Yeah, Diggs is kind of hitting the wall pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. It happens.
Yeah, not everybody ages like Larry Fitzgerald.
No, or Jerry Rice.
Yeah, probably the two most graceful agings of wide receivers in NFL history. Because both of them transformed into different types of receivers into their 30s and accepted it and extended their effective life. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald became a 9.5 yards per catch possession receiver guy and added like 5 or 6 years to his career because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And he accepted that he lost speed and he adapted accordingly. And when you do that, you can, and if you can accept it, you can put up an ungodly numbers like both of them did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not going to happen with Stephon Diggs. But what's going to happen is we're going to beg for help on our YouTube channel, Mace. How do people help us out?
Yeah, we ain't too proud to beg.
That's right.
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell.
So that you
never
miss Vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at C. Salami saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Stay frosty.